Team Satyr. Boom!
Pointless sounds in the beginning. Yeah, I'm not entirely good at intros, so just accept anything that I say and or do. I guess, yeah. So anyway, a little while back, a commenter had actually asked me and Rashad to do a list of our favorite and least favorite Batman villains. Now, unfortunately, I might not actually be able to get hold of Rashad for this, since he and I have two different schedules, but in the meantime, I'm still going to try and go through with this request. So, how I'm going to do this list is I'm going to have my top 5 favorite villains and bottom 5 least favorite villains. I will give one bit of a parameter. I am not including anti-heroes, so this means that Catwoman will unfortunately not be on the list, since she doesn't particularly try to be antagonistic to Batman. So, starting off, I'm going to do my least favorite Batman villains.
So, starting at number 5 in terms of least favorite supervillains, I would say Bane. Quite frankly, Bane isn't necessarily a bad character, but I've always found him to be very limited considering what he can do. Because, like, you see Bane and all he goes is, "Ha! I'm going to beat the Batman! Ha!" And, it's not a bad goal in life, I guess, but it doesn't really make sense as to why he's so obsessed with beating the guy, since his entire thing is to be a scientist, luchador, muscle, steroids. Yeah, he was interesting, but he didn't exactly have much of a calling. And aesthetically wise, he wasn't exactly that interesting. Number 4, I would then say Killer Croc, who in my case seemed like a lower degenerated version of Bane. The reason I say lower and degenerated is because essentially he has a very similar theme, it's just he's much more murderous. In terms of abilities, the only real difference between Bane and Killer Croc is that Killer Croc doesn't beef up as much, and he spends more time swimming and trying to eat people. And, you can do that if that's your entire prerogative, but that seems very simplistic as to what you could have had for a villain. Number 3, I would have to say Two-Face. Now, Two-Face, quite frankly, he does have a very interesting aesthetic, since you always get to see this character have two different sides to his face, one being pretty boy, one being ugly, and he always kind of has this very kind of jerky feel to him. Now, I will say the renditions of him kind of vary between having a very Crusader-esque lawyer, then going to a very corrupt-looking lawyer who is very appraised by his physical features, but, it's like when I saw him, especially in the Batman animated series, I kept seeing like Sylvester Stallone as a lawyer going, "Hey, Batman, why you don't like me?" And, he had an okay aesthetic. As for his active goals and what he wanted to do, he was a little bit stale, since his entire thing was just to be a mobster. Not even be one of the greatest mobster, and quite frankly, it's not like he was ever known for his strategy, he was just a mobster. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to say my perspective on some of these things might be a little bit limited, since I don't read comics as often as some people would probably expect one to, if they were going to make a list like this, but hey, I was asked, so yeah. Number 2, I would say my second least favorite Batman villain is Poison Ivy. Now, mind you, this isn't because of her aesthetics. Now, because I will say, when it comes to characters, I really like the aesthetics of them, and then I also like their personality. And quite frankly, I love her character and I love her aesthetics. But she has such a waste of what she can do. Because quite frankly, what I dislike is how much potential she has, and then they kind of just keep giving her the same sandbag thing. I want to protect the plants and Mother Nature. And well, fine, if you want to do that, then actually do it. Because, you have the ability to control nature. Not to say that Batman isn't a competent villain, but come on. I've seen you make a giant tree monster walk through the city before. I'm pretty sure you can do something about this. But of course, every single time, her plan is always really stupid or very simplistic, and it seems like the number one thing they want to do with her is make sure she's a hypersexual nymph. And I don't mean like nymphomaniac, I mean like literally back to Greek legend where you had these dryads, which were essentially fairies who disguised themselves as plants, particularly trees, and then afterwards when they revealed their true selves, they were these green plant ladies who were all like, "Don't you like my tree bark, huh?" And to be fair, even when you see the drawings from Roman or Greek art, they were relatively attractive, so I'll give them that. But that's pretty much always been the theme behind Poison Ivy, and she seemed like she could be a lot more. And for a character whose entire driven point in life is to save nature, you'd think at some point she would just, leave Gotham. Like, maybe make a plant boat and just kind of sail off, because, no one's really gonna stop her. Or if she really wanted to, she could just go like, hey, you know how, like, the reason why people have plants in cities is to kind of help make oxygen, since this place is basically a death trap without oxygen and the trees? I'm just gonna take the trees and just fuck off. And honestly, she would have achieved her goal in really just putting a real stick in it for Gotham, and could have gone somewhere, most likely, the rainforest, because, it's pretty much the poster child for all man versus nature, man is evil. And she probably could have just become a queen there, and she could have just become Gaia at that point. So, again, I like her character, I like her aesthetics, it's just, they tend to over-sexualize her more often than not, and really, she has so much she can do. And lastly, for my number one least favorite Batman villain, it's Penguin. I hate Penguin. The reason I dislike Penguin is that he's in a lot of cases very similar to Two-Face in terms of what he wants to achieve, but it's so limited. Because, if you know anything about Penguin, essentially he's very similar to Bruce in the same fashion that he had a rich family, and like Bruce, his family went into some financial ruin. And quite frankly, all he really has to do is just kinda go back to what he was, and he has so much potential to what he could be. And instead, he just decides to be a rich person who's a crime lord. Like, what a waste. Just goes, yeah, take this, Batman, and I'm gonna throw you with my guns that I collected. Really? Come on. My entire time I'm fighting against villains. I fight against a plant chick. I fight against an ice dude. I fight against a guy who flies in the air shooting missiles at me. And I fight an insane lunatic who quite frankly makes people laugh to death after stabbing them. Really? You're just gonna go with guns? Considering all the things you can do? And again, why are you here in Gotham? And I know you're insane to some degree, but you can just go out, venture, spend your money on doing whatever. You could be a freaking billionaire doing whatever, and be a better villain instead of just sticking here going, I'm gonna protect my territory. So, honestly, I never liked Penguin's aesthetic. I never liked his character. He always just seems like this really dorky kid who got pissed off everyone who made fun of him for being disfigured, and then he just goes through an entire power trip. And that's all he really is. So, those are my 5 least favorite Batman supervillains. You can disagree with them. If you want to also discuss your reasons to why you think other characters should be on the list, by all means. Now, to the list I have a little bit more preference for, my favorite top 5 Batman villains. So, starting at number 5, I'd say Mr. Freeze is actually my 5th favorite most Batman villain. Now, I will say a lot of Batman villains tend to be very elemental based. Poison Ivy, you even have Firefly, and now you have Mr. Freeze. But of the villains, Mr. Freeze has been the one who has a little bit more of an agenda behind him, aside from just deciding, save nature or burn. His entire thing was, I want to save my wife, and quite frankly, I just want to sit in peace. Now, mind you, he can kind of vary from time to time, depending on what his entire goal is, but nonetheless, he's been a relatively chill... Oh my god, that's a pun. No, I love puns, I don't care. He's been the most relatively decent guy. So, I like Mr. Freeze, and quite frankly, aesthetically, he is always the most interesting to see in most cases. No matter what series he happens to pop in, he always looks cool. Even when you could go back to, like, the WC show, called The Batman, that Mr. Freeze was amazing to look at. But yeah, he's been a pretty cool character. I think he could have used a little bit more motivation behind his actions, or be a little bit more interesting story-wise, but pretty cool otherwise. Number 4, I would actually choose the Riddler. Now, the Riddler is a character who isn't exactly the most aesthetically interesting, but quite frankly, the reason I like him so much is because this is one guy who really, really, really just wants to beat Batman in terms of wits. Like, he doesn't even want to take anything over, he doesn't want to become the biggest boss, he just wants to beat Batman in a game of wits, and quite frankly, I find that hilarious. Because, imagine this one guy who just keeps coming back to you every single week and then constructs this entire elaborate puzzle just for you to solve. He goes, I got you this time, Batman. Yeah, look at this. Look at this crossword puzzle, and look how if you get anything wrong, it kills a person. But you can also save a person if you happen to ask a person on the phone line. Of course, they could be involved too. You don't know. And it's like, it's this entirely overtly planned puzzle just so he can say, I'm smarter than you. Not even through, like, facts or me who's better at doing equations or who can make things better. No, just wits. quite frankly, I always find it interesting to see whenever the Riddler decides to combat against Batman, just because it's interesting. My number 3 will be the Court of Owls. Now, I know they're not technically a single villain, but in the meantime, I'm kind of trying to just put them all in one since they pretty much only act as a unit. So if you don't know anything about the Court of Owls, they are essentially this entire association of the upper crust of Gotham who decided we're going to rule it in the shadows, but we're also going to be really, really douchey about it and just kind of do whatever the hell we want. And eventually, what happened is they would kind of control different parts of Gotham throughout the ages. They even technically killed off part of Batman's family. I mean, think about that. That's not exactly a long list of people who are capable of doing that. I mean, there's like that one mugger who got lucky when the Waynes weren't doing anything, and then there's been the Court of Owls. And aside from that, they also have this entire elite group of ninjas who are also undead that they just preserve whenever they want to go around and mess with people. And when they were introduced in one of the comics, they had a comic that was so amazing that it just kept turning left, right, up, back, down as they were just messing with Batman in his mind because they drugged him. It was one of the most visually interesting Batman comics I could possibly see, and their costumes were amazing. And in case you haven't figured out, the reason why they chose Owl, not the characters but the creators, is because owls actually hunt bats. Now, of course, they were owls before Batman became Batman, but you get the point. So, as for number 2, it is actually Harley Quinn. She is one of my favorite Batman villains because she is an enjoyment to see in every regard. I mean, if you don't believe me how amazing a character she was, this is a character that actually started off in the Batman animated series, and then because they loved her so much, they put her in the comic. And this character is just aesthetically adorable and amazing anytime you happen to see her. And she's kind of that one character that you can never really feel bad for whenever she does something just grotesque or just gratuitous. If you saw that she had beaten someone's head in, you'd be like, "Oh, Harley," and she would basically just have the entire Looney Tunes thing come around her head, and she would just go, "Mwah, mwah, mwah." And honestly, she's just a delight in every single regard, which is why I'm happy she's finally getting onto the screen this time around when it comes to films, because it's been way too long for us to actually see her, since she's such a great character. And of course, now for number 1, the ultimate thing that you probably try and figure out, what is his number 1 villain? No, wait, we know. We all know exactly who it is, don't we? It's the Scarecrow. You said Joker, didn't you? I know you did. Now, you're probably asking, how could you possibly put Scarecrow over Joker? I mean, it's the Joker. He's so freaking amazing. I mean, he literally steals just about any medium he's in from whoever else is in it. I mean, let's take a look at the Batman movie. You have the Batman Begins, which Batman was the beginning, and he was doing all the things on his own. And then you had the Dark Knight, which, let's be honest, people are still cosplaying as the Joker from that series. And before that, you had Tim Burton's Batman movies, where Jack Nicholson was probably the most notable villain from that entire series that he did. You know, until he stopped and they decided to go make mistakes with third and fourth Batman movie. Oh dear God, they did so many mistakes. Jim Carrey, it's not your fault, but you didn't help. So, yeah, Joker, very great villain. The reason he can't be on the list is because, honestly, it's already known he is Batman's best villain. I mean, put him on the list is unfair. I mean, would you take a 5-year-old and put him into a fight with a 20-year-old who's an MMA fighter? No. You go, what's wrong with you? Why'd you put a 5-year-old against an MMA fighter? Hell, the MMA fighter feels awkward, because honestly, he's like, why'd you put a kid in here? I can't hit a kid. And the kid is just, like, crapping himself. I mean, look at this kid. Why would you do this? That's wrong. So honestly, the Joker's too good of a character to the point to where you should probably put him on the list of some of the best villains ever, as opposed to just trying to limit him to a Batman villain, because he's too good. So I decided to stick with Scarecrow instead. And the reason I love Scarecrow so much is because every single time you see him, he is a visual delight, because quite frankly, he is just frightening, he's menacing, he's just creepy. And this is a guy who spends more time trying to ruin people and destroy people through their own mental sabotage than actually try to kill them. Because honestly, if he just made poison gas, it'd probably make his job a lot easier. But still, this guy is just amazing to watch, doing everything he does. It's just, hey, guess what? What do you fear? Do you feel cockroaches? Bam, I'm a giant cockroach made to look like a cockroach mother who's spewing out more cockroaches. And guess what? Cockroaches. Yeah. and you will never be right again. And in some regards, it might be a little bit better to actually try to destroy an enemy mentally than physically, because, let's be honest, in Gotham, just straight up killing some people isn't exactly the biggest message. It just kind of lets people know you're dangerous. But if you can fuck with people, oh my god, people are afraid of you. And so that's the reason why I chose Scarecrow as my number one villain. So, next time, maybe I'll see if I can get Rashad to do his list of villains and see what he likes. So, if you haven't liked this video, comment, rate, subscribe, and, the usual business whiz blood, blood, blah, 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 blah. Outro!
Like, comment, subscribe, 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 like, comment, subscribe.